Marcus didn't even look me in the eye when he said it. Just flipped his iPad around like a bored waiter reading me the specials. We're streamlining, he muttered, like that explained why I'd been summoned at 3:17 p.m. on a Wednesday with no calendar invite, no agenda, and no warning. Behind him stood Janine from HR, arms folded, hair in a tight bun, eyes darting like she was watching a hostage negotiation from the inside. I blinked once. Streamlining? He gestured vaguely toward the door. It's not personal, just structural. That's corporate for you made me look bad in front of the board one too many times, and now you're being erased like a typo. Janine slid the NDA across the table. I didn't even get a printout of my severance summary, just a QR code taped to the side of the box they handed me. The same one I'd used 3 years ago to carry in a potted succulent, and a framed photo of my dog wearing a party hat. Now it held my keyboard wrist pad, a mug that said world's okayest analyst, and the residual dignity of a woman who'd given 9 years to smoothing out chaos that Marcus wore like cologne. Funny thing is, I didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't even flinch. I just stood there while he adjusted his AirPods and said, I have a 3:30. I hope his next call was to his ego, because that's the only thing he promoted this quarter. And hey, real quick before we dive deeper, 97% of you listening right now haven't hit subscribe. Do me a solid and smash that like button too. It helps our team keep digging up these stories instead of digging through HR portals. Appreciate it. Anyway, I walked out with my box, my exit badge, and the ghost of every all-nighter I'd pulled so Marcus could sleep soundly, thinking he was a genius. The intern didn't meet my eyes on the way out. Can't blame her. When she started 2 months ago, I was the one who taught her how to run cohort analysis without making the database cry. Now she probably thinks streamlining is a natural disaster you survive by ducking under your desk. I didn't go home. I went to the park across from the office, sat on a crooked bench that smelled like damp leaves and regret, and stared at the box on my lap. No thank you card, no farewell Slack post, not even a sad little cupcake with my name misspelled. Just a form letter, an NDA, and the distinct aftertaste of betrayal mixed with recycled coffee pod bitterness. A pigeon hopped onto the bench beside me, looked at my cardboard box, and pooped. Took that as a sign from the universe that things could always get more symbolic. So I did what any humiliated ex-corporate foot soldier would do. I pulled out my phone and opened LinkedIn. Typed a single message. To an old college friend, mid-level at some VC firm out west. It just said, I'm available now. And then I hit send, wiped pigeon crap off my sleeve, and started walking. The worst part wasn't the ghosting. It was the cheerful rejection emails, those little digital slaps with phrases, like we've decided to move forward with candidates whose backgrounds more closely align with our current needs. You mean someone cheaper? Or younger? Or someone who didn't have the audacity to make her boss look competent for 9 straight fiscal quarters? I updated my resume 17 times in 2 weeks. Changed streamlined cross-functional collaboration workflows to aligned multi-team operational cadence. Don't ask me what either phrase means. Corporate speak is just mad libs with buzzwords and trauma. Every coffee chat was the same. A polite head tilt, a flat oat milk latte, a too long pause when I mentioned my last role. Then the classic pivot, well hey, if I hear of anything, I'll pass your name along. Spoiler, they didn't. By week 4, I was one lukewarm cappuccino away from applying to be a barista. At least those jobs came with tips and honesty. And came Rachel, college friend, former debate partner. Now some kind of ops lead at a venture firm that described itself as hands-on and strategically disruptive, which in VC land means we break stuff then write Medium posts about it. We met for drink, no lattes, thank God. Just straight gin and awkward small talk. Still with what was his name? She asked. Marcus. Oh, right, she sipped. He always seemed shiny. I raised an eyebrow. Like a polished turd? She laughed, choked a little, and then said, we actually might need someone. Not full-time, but advisory. Cleanup work, portfolio audit stuff, NDA level, technical cleanup, I asked, trying to sound casual while my soul sat up and begged like a golden retriever. Yep, some of our investments are inefficient, bloated. We need someone who can spot rot. Now there's a word I understood. 2 days later, I signed the NDA. It was modest pay. Hourly, no benefits, no titles, just full data access and a spreadsheet of review targets. One stood out, labeled only Project Hemlock. It wasn't until I got the Slack export that I realized what it was. Messages loaded slow, like my laptop knew something I didn't. At first, it was just usernames, strings of random initials and timestamps. Then a channel name flickered into view, #Q4rockers, and then I saw his name. Marcus. I sat still, staring at the screen, heart doing this weird jazz drum solo in my chest. The export loaded another thread. Marcus, let's massage this a bit. Slide 12 still looks like a dip, and there it was. Project Hemlock was my old company. They didn't know it yet, but I did. And suddenly all those humiliating coffees and dead-end job apps felt like gasoline. Because I'd just been handed a match, I laughed. Actually laughed out loud alone. At my kitchen table with 3 empty La Croix cans and a half-eaten bagel slowly fossilizing beside my laptop. They really didn't revoke my vendor credentials. Still had access to HubTrack, Expense Sled, and some Frankenstein database interface they duct taped together for contractor invoicing. Amateurs. I clicked through dashboards like I was walking through an abandoned house I used to live in. The furniture was the same, just dustier, and pretending it wasn't infested. First thing I noticed? Q3 spend was up 48%. 48%. For a division that supposedly streamlined itself by offloading a mid-senior ops lead and 3 data analysts. Either they were feeding their servers caviar or someone was funneling money into the same initiative Marcus used to name drop when he wanted to sound visionary. Click, click, export. I opened the OKR tracker next. That same channel Marcus always insisted on posting in late at night to show hustle. Funny, I remembered Q2 retention metrics sitting at 72% before I left. Now, magically, they were listed at 86.1%. Even funnier, the data source column just said internal extrapolation. Translation, we made it up and hoped no one would check. I pulled up the old shared doc I used to maintain, before Marcus had me scrub it of unhelpful trends. Back when I still believed alignment meant something other than tell the story he wants or else. God, the flashbacks hit hard. Him standing over my desk, sipping his $14 cold brew and whispering, "Can we, nudge this? Doesn't have to be fake, just better framed." And me, exhausted at 9:43 p.m. on a Tuesday, staring at a retention chart that looked like a ski slope and wondering how much of my soul it cost to round up to the nearest lie. Well, turns out souls age well in storage. I opened a blank file, titled it Project Hemlock Official Audit Draft, and then another, Personal Notes Do Not Submit. The first one had bullet points, references, and screenshots. Clear, neutral, almost boring. The second one was where I let it breathe. Line by line. I started building a map of dysfunction. Vendor invoice inconsistencies. Duplicate contractor payments. A consulting retainer to Deep Strategy Labs that looked suspiciously like Marcus's college roommate's shell company. There were Slack messages too, one from him to the finance lead. Let's process these now before the new budget lock. Timestamp, 3 hours before my exit meeting. They weren't just messy. They were hiding rot with glitter. I stayed up until 3 a.m., cross-referencing vendor logs, contractor IDs, and expense claims with time-off calendars and Slack activity. That's how I found the ghost contractors. 2 of them paid through 3 cycles with no associated logins or email trails. One had an invoice labeled Innovation Strategy Alignment Phase 2. That file? It was a JPEG of a Sudoku puzzle. Swear to God. I saved it all, clipped it, tagged it, logged every source. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than shame or exhaustion. I felt aligned, not to Marcus, not to the board, to the truth I'd been told to sand down. This time I was keeping the edges sharp. The deeper I dug, the clearer the smell got, not just rot, design. Marcus hadn't just tripped into dysfunction. He'd curated it like a man arranging dead flowers in a $500 ceramic vase and calling it vision. His whole empire was built on 3 things: inflated KPIs, consultant theater, and plausible deniability. The KPIs were the easiest to dissect. Take monthly active engagements, a phrase he invented during a Q2 investor update that everyone nodded at like it meant something. Turns out it included Slack pings, comments on internal blog posts, emoji reacts, calendar invites sent, not accepted. That's right. If I asked the intern to a meeting and she ignored me, that was still an active engagement. It got worse. Churn was counted only upon formal written request. So if someone rage quit over email or just ghosted, not churn. Net revenue retention? Based on contracted revenue not collected, so a client could be 3 months late and still count as a growth driver. I compiled graphs, charts, and comparisons. On one tab, the official metrics. On another, corrected numbers. The difference was grotesque, like comparing an Instagram filter to a mugshot. But metrics alone don't tell a story. People do, so I started calling them. Women I'd worked beside, the ones who vanished after realignments, the ones I'd assumed just got better offers. Turned out Marcus had a pattern. Mid-career women. Smart, detail-oriented, outspoken but professional. Every one of them had caught something: duplicate invoices, strange travel expenses, timesheet anomalies. Every one of them had raised a hand. And then, side meetings, performance reviews, gaslighting so polite it came with a smile. You're just not aligned with where we're going. You seem negative lately. Have you thought about taking some time? And then the box. I talked to 6 of them, 2 cried. One just laughed and said, "You're next." Not was, our present tense. Like we were passengers on the same ghost train, just at different stations. I didn't put those stories in the official report. No need. Instead, I let the numbers speak. The engagement rate was inflated by 61%. Contractor bloat, up 200% from last year. Unreconciled vendor payments, $480,000 and counting. I ended with a projection. If no changes are made, Division C will enter a sustained deficit by Q2. Losses projected to double within 6 months, assuming current burn and churn trends continue. No adjectives, no dramatic language, just the math. Then one last footnote. All data validated through current system access and invoice trails. Recommend immediate review of internal oversight controls. The report read like a eulogy. Not just for the division, for the entire illusion Marcus had been selling. And the most satisfying part, I didn't raise my voice once. I just turned on the lights. The email came in with the subject line, Portfolio Review Advisor Attendance Requested. Nothing dramatic, no bold fonts, no confetti, just 5 sentences and a Zoom link. And yet my hands went cold. It was happening. They were putting Marcus's kingdom under the microscope. And I was being invited to sit in the room, not as the disgraced ex-employee, not as the woman who once stayed up till 2 a.m. fixing his quarterly deck, but as a technical advisor. A ghost with credentials. My job, they said, was to observe and provide clarification as needed. Translation, speak only when asked. Let the charts do the stabbing. I prepped for 3 straight days. Scrubbed every trace of branding from the report. Relabeled charts in VC-friendly language, ROI delta, operational drag, burn alignment variance. I rehearsed my lines in the mirror like I was prepping for hostage negotiation. Based on available vendor data, the model assumes a 12-month forecast with no additional spend buffers. Contract redundancy appears to be a systemic risk vector, corporate poetry. And then, when the report was buttoned up and sterile as a tax audit, I added one line. Small font. End of slide 12. See Appendix, Division C Strategic Misalignment. I hyperlinked it to the deeper report, the one with Marcus's full house of financial sins. Every vanity KPI, every ghost contractor, every overpaid invoice to Deep Strategy Labs. It was an Easter egg with a time bomb inside. Next, I pulled up the attendee list for the call. 4 VC partners, 2 founders from other portfolio companies, 1 observer, and Marcus. His name sat there like a spoiled oyster. I stared at it for a long time. It had been weeks since I'd heard his voice, longer since he'd smiled at me like I was his favorite tool. I wasn't sure what I'd feel seeing him again. Anger, smugness, sadness, but no, what I felt was readiness. He could recognize me or not, acknowledge me or pretend I was just some clipboard in the corner, didn't matter, the data would speak. The questions would come, and when they did, I'd be right there, waiting, quiet, but not silent. The call opened with the familiar jingle. 4 synthetic piano notes I'd come to associate with anxiety sweats and performative optimism. Boxes loaded, backgrounds varied. One partner sat in a sleek office with framed startup exit logos behind him. Another wore a hoodie in what looked like a wine cellar. One founder had a baby strapped to his chest, gently bouncing like it was his 4th investor call that day. And then Marcus appeared. Same smile, same posture. Hair just a little more desperate. He was in what used to be our all-hands room, now converted into what he probably called a leadership pod. He leaned forward, elbows on desk, and opened with a line he'd used 100 times before. Great to be here. Excited to walk you through some of the wins we've been stacking this quarter. Stacking wins. Jesus. I muted my mic before I snorted. The lead partner, David, mid-50s, notorious for cutting CEOs off mid-sentence when they veered into buzzword territory, just nodded. Let Marcus talk. For 6 minutes, Marcus laid it on thick. Customer engagement is up 20% quarter over quarter. We've doubled down on contractor flexibility to scale faster. We're seeing early traction on our enterprise pipeline. If you squinted hard enough and ignored every definition of those words, it almost sounded real. I sat still, camera off, just a gray bubble in the corner of the call labeled Technical Advisor LR. He hadn't clocked me yet, or if he had, he didn't show it. Then David cleared his throat. Appreciate the overview, Marcus, he said, voice neutral but heavy. We've been reviewing all divisions for alignment and efficiency. A few are looking very strong. He clicked to the next slide. Division A, for example, exceptional retention and clear ROI growth. Division B, a few kinks. Promising burn control. Marcus beamed like a man waiting for a compliment. David didn't smile. Now, he continued, we'd like to spend a bit more time on Division C. Based on the advisor's report, there are some deeper issues we need to understand. You could feel the shift. One of the founders leaned forward. The guy with the baby stopped bouncing. Marcus's face twitched, just a flicker, like a glitch in a well-rehearsed loop. I'd be happy to clarify anything, he said quickly. We've been iterating fast, and David raised a hand. Not angrily, just firmly. We'll get there. But first, I'd like to walk through a few of the key findings. He clicked again. Slide 13, spend trends vs revenue trajectory. And there it was, my graph, the one that looked like a seesaw built over a sinkhole. Revenue flatlined, spend hiking like it had something to prove. I watched Marcus blink twice. His hands moved out of frame, probably adjusting his posture, the way he always did when he was about to talk his way out of something. But David wasn't done. In reviewing this, he said, we noticed several areas of concern, ghost contracts, vendor bloat, metric inflation. A pause, just long enough to sting. And per the advisor's report, if unaddressed, Division C is projected to double its losses within 6 months. Silence. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then said, wait, his report. David glanced at his notes. Yes, our technical advisor, LR, and then I unmuted. Actually, I said, turning my camera on, that would be her report. Marcus's face drained. He stared at the screen, lips parted like he'd forgotten how to form words. "Hi, Marcus," I said, calm as a guillotine. "Long time." David didn't look surprised. He just added, "You have about 60 seconds to respond before we open this up for discussion." And then he clicked to the next slide, Appendix D source validation and audit trail. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The numbers were already speaking louder than I ever could. David's voice cut through the silence like an accountant wielding a scalpel. As I was saying, he continued, "The advisor's report outlines three primary concerns with Division C." He clicked again. Slide 14, Key Risks and Operational Inefficiencies. 1. KPI inflation. Engagement metrics were redefined without disclosure to include non-interactive events. Slack pings, calendar invites, even bot responses. The advisor traced this change to a directive issued mid-Q2. Marcus shifted in his seat. The camera caught it, a small, involuntary twitch of his right eye. 2. David said, calm as ever, burn rate mismatch. Contractor expenses tripled, but there's no deliverable correlation. Several vendors couldn't produce work logs. One invoice, labeled Innovation Sprint, turned out to be an AI-generated mood board with the company logo pasted over a beach. I'd actually laughed out loud when I found that one. David didn't. 3. Initiative misalignment. Significant resources allocated to projects with no measurable impact. One example involved a six-figure spend on something labeled Synergy Enablement Labs. The project was described internally as pre-revenue concept scaffolding. One of the other partners muttered under his breath, "Good grief." David continued, taken together, "These issues suggest not just inefficiency, but a systemic absence of oversight." His report, Marcus flinched, recommends we dissolve the entire division and reallocate resources toward a new initiative with validated growth potential. And there it was. The execution. The guillotine didn't drop, it just hovered, letting everyone watch the blade reflect the horror in Marcus's face. He blinked fast, swallowed hard, and then his report? He repeated, leaning toward the screen like maybe the angle had distorted the words. That was my cue. I clicked start video, camera on, lighting soft but clear. Hair pulled back, face neutral, blouse sharp enough to cut glass. "Actually," I said, voice steady and precise, "that would be my report." Marcus's face collapsed in real time. He blinked again, jaw slack. Brows twitching like they were trying to decode the moment. "Hi, Marcus." I let the silence hang like a curtain in a burning theater. "Been a while." David didn't even look at him. He just said, with the same tone you use to end a board game you've already won, "I believe you have about 60 seconds to respond." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, checked his notes like maybe reality had been misfiled. I waited, calm, unblinking. Years of being the ghostwriter behind his spin, the fixer of his mess, the one who built the castle he took credit for. Now I was the ghost with a spotlight, and the blade was still hanging, shining, just inches from his neck. Marcus finally found words, but not coherence. I think there's been a misrepresentation here," he stammered, his voice cracking halfway through the sentence. "We're in the middle of several of pending initiatives. Some of these numbers, look, it's all about framing, right? These figures are being pulled out of context by someone who clearly has an axe to grind." David didn't blink. Another partner leaned in and said, "We reviewed the audit trail ourselves. The context is clear and damning." Marcus turned to me on the screen like he could conjure doubt with just enough faux outrage. "You left the company under strained terms. This whole report feels like a vendetta masquerading as due diligence." I didn't flinch. "Actually," I said, voice so calm it echoed, "I left because you forced me out. I was the one who flagged the ghost contractors. The expense duplications, the burn mismatch. You told me to massage the narrative, your words." David flipped to slide 16, Appendix D source validation. I continued, precise as a scalpel. "All data sources are cited in Appendix D. Vendor logs, internal audit trails, Slack timestamps, invoice records, every number is backed. I didn't invent this. I simply reported the numbers I once helped you hide." There it was. The truth, sharpened like a scalpel and placed gently on the table for everyone to admire. Marcus tried to pivot. "This isn't how we handle things. Look, the division's got potential. We've got enterprise leads. There's an RFP in progress right now with a third partner cut in, board, and done. One of the leads was an intern testing your chatbot. It's in the report." Marcus's mouth opened and just stalled. For a beat, nobody said anything. Then David gave a tight, almost polite smile. "Thank you, Lena, this was overdue." And without another word, he clicked a button on his end. Marcus's box vanished mid-sentence. Muted, removed, just like that. The man who steamrolled over years of work with words like optics and momentum was now a ghost in a Zoom history log. I sat there, camera still on, jaw relaxed, pulse steady. It wasn't revenge. It was sanitation. The trash had finally taken itself out. 3 weeks later, my badge arrived in the mail, this time without a box. No NDA gag clause, no streamlining euphemisms. Just a clean onboarding packet, a direct deposit form, and a Slack invite that didn't expire after 30 days. Title, Transition Lead Growth Reboot Initiative. Funding source, the still warm corpse of Division C. David called me personally. Short and to the point. "You built the report, you know the bones. We want you leading the rebuild." I said yes. Calmly, without emotion. But when I hung up, I allowed myself exactly one loud, primal scream into a throw pillow. Then I opened a fresh doc titled Reorg Candidate Pool. The first 6 names, women Marcus had pushed out like unwanted furniture. Ashley from Strategy. Deep analytics brain, always talked too fast and asked too many questions for Marcus's taste. Danica from Ops, fired 6 weeks before me for not scaling with company culture. Priya from PM, told Marcus he was over-indexing on shallow innovation and got iced from all roadmap meetings. I called them, one by one. No buzzwords, no long-winded pitches. Just you were right and I want you back. Every single one said yes. The first internal kickoff felt surreal. Same work, same bones, but no second guessing, no smile policing, no soft threats wrapped in empty compliments. Just women sitting at laptops, rebuilding the thing we were once told we weren't qualified to lead. A week later, a package showed up at my apartment. No sender listed. Inside was a bottle of Syrah and a card that read, in neat handwriting, "We should have hired you a decade ago." I didn't toast. I didn't cry. I just put the bottle on my shelf beside the only framed photo I kept from my old desk, me, grinning with a whiteboard behind me, back when I still thought Marcus's approval meant something. Then I turned to the real whiteboard in my home office. Under the project name, Growth Reboot Initiative, I wrote in bold black marker, "No more boxes. Not for me. Not for them. Not ever again. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear."